Off top, Oprah's real name is actually Orpah, but got mispronounced so many times that she was like, yeah, we'll stick with this Oprah thing. Play the music.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.
Welcome to the Domonique Foxworth Show. Getting ready for the Super Bowl week. Before we do that, we got a little football in today's show, but we want to get into some basketball topics. Where do you want to start, Charles?
I want to air an off-air conversation, which is who is tougher to play against, LaDainian Tomlinson or Adrian Peterson. But to the listeners, before this, we were talking about the Fiesta Bowl with Boise State and Oklahoma, and I was saying one of the weird things I thought about that game was not the Ian Johnson proposal. It was like, what a weird cap to Adrian Peterson's college career, which started out with him finishing second in the Heisman Trophy as a freshman.
He was incredible football player. I'd say Adrian Peterson over everybody. LaDainian Tomlinson he didn't have the power that Adrian Peterson had, and I don't remember him having the like pull away speed that Adrian Peterson had. But yeah, Adrian, I can't think of any running backs. And I've told the story before about how LaDainian made me miss in the phone booth. Yeah. So like I respect him. I mean, this is no slight to LT. But I remember, and like I'm not a big guy, but I tackled plenty of people, and it was never a problem. Like, it didn't hurt that bad. Adrian Peterson is one of the few players where I tackled him and I think Steven Jackson, the running back, right? Was it? Yeah, the big running back for the Rams.
Yeah.
Him and Adrian Peterson were the two running backs that I remember throwing my arms into their legs to, like, tackle them, and it felt like I put my arm in a lawnmower. And I was like, this is not okay. So then I had to, you go with the forearm to the legs from here on out because I'm not sticking my extended arm in there. And in the same game where Adrian Peterson's legs chewed up my arm like a lawnmower, I was like, my thing was being fast. The one thing that, like, rarely, I think there was probably twice on the field where I thought this person is faster than me. It was Bethel Johnson was running down on punt return, and I was trying to block him. Or he's running on punt. I was punt return. I was trying to block him. And normally I would let the gunner, get away from me a little bit and then refocus my angle and catch him at the ball and block him and right in front of the ball carrier. It was great. Worked all the time. Steve Suter had a bunch of touchdowns in college in part because I was great at doing that. And Bethel, I was like, all right, now it's time to get him. And he just kept getting further and further away from me. And then with the Adrian Peterson thing, like anytime someone had like a long run, I would be able to go catch them before they got to the end zone, especially if they were on the other side of the field. Like I just take a good angle. I have the angle combined with the fact that I'm faster than them, go get him. Adrian Peterson got out across the far side of the field. We were in Minnesota. I think I was playing for the Ravens at the time. And I remember, it's like, all right, calculate my angle.
Knock him.
Oh, and the angle changed on me. And then next thing I know, he was in the end zone. So yeah, Adrian Peterson.
I mean, he's one of those runners too, where despite being the most talented running back in the NFL, he also sort of looked like Isaiah Pacheco when he runs, like cartoonishly angry.
Yeah, he fumbled a good amount. And I think it was in part because it was like the ball was a secondary concern. It felt like it was like the most important thing was destroying whatever was in front of him. But yeah, he was incredible.
Yeah, in his second and third seasons, he had 16 total fumbles.
Damn. A lot. It's worth it, though. I feel like the Josh Allen conversation with Adrian Peterson, fine.
Yeah.
Fumble a couple times, whatever.
There aren't that many running backs in the last 30 years that the offense was built around just handing them the ball.
Yeah, that's like an old school type of way to play football where the running back's the most important player on the offense. We don't do that anymore, and we stopped doing it a while ago, but Adrian was still the player that we did that for, and it was a successful offense. Also, we're like, you load the box up. I don't care. Give it to Adrian. Does not matter the defense. We're not doing any game plan because you know what the game plan is. They're going to give it to Adrian.
All-time maniac backfield, him and Brett Favre.
He had the last MVP for running back, Adrian Peterson?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was 2,000, right? Or close to
2,000 yards, yeah.
Yeah, 2,000 yards.
Coming off the ACL.
Not the year 2000, but 2,000 yards. Yeah, he was like the first player to like come back from that ACL crazy fast too.
9 months.
Yeah.
Or 8 months.
Absurd, which like...
Another casualty of the FedEx Field turf. All right, let's talk some NBA. And I specifically want to talk about this story with you because of your experience of, it's not just, you have different perspectives on fans, you have different perspectives on organizations than a lot of people who are going to talk about this. But the big story in the NBA right now is Joel Embiid and Joel Embiid's injury. He was having the best season of his career. He was the MVP frontrunner. He's averaging 36 points a game. As Zach Lowe pointed out, the most points per minute in NBA history, even above Wilt's 50-point-per-game season. That came to a screeching halt when he sat out in Denver. Fans and the media got on him for ducking Jokic for the 5th straight year in Denver. He came back against Golden State. Someone fell on his knee. Kuminga fell on his knee. And he was then diagnosed with a displaced part of his meniscus. He has had 2 meniscus injuries, 1 to each knee. This is now a 3rd one. It's now clear he's not going to hit the 65-game minimum to be the MVP. He's tumbled down those odds. And do you buy the narrative that the media pressure and the fans and the 65-game rule is to blame for Joel Embiid's injury?
So the 65-game rule, when I saw Joel Embiid injury, like my immediate reflex was to like be annoyed about the 65-game rule because it like fell right into my wheelhouse of like protecting the players and not putting this extra burden of pressure on it. But I'm having a hard time of actually sincerely believing that that pressure is enough for a player who's hurt, who understands that winning a championship is the most important to him. A player like Joel Embiid, who's had injury issues his entire career and had conditioning issues in the playoffs, like who just came off of winning an MVP, like I find it hard to believe that this injury is a result of that rule. And if the rule didn't exist, the pressure would still exist. Like if the 65-game rule didn't exist, people would still roast him for not playing in Denver against Jokic. That was the 65-game rule that was getting him judged there. And I think even before the 65-game rule existed, the conversation about if he genuinely cares about the MVP trophy, which I'm not sure that
he did last year.
Yeah, he did last year. Agreed.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that he did this season. But if he did, you still have that pressure without the 65-game rule. Yeah. So, like, the rule itself, I'm not going to defend, but I'm also not going to, like, disingenuously use this injury as an opportunity to destroy the rule. I don't think the rule should exist, but I don't think the rule is the cause of this problem.
I kind of think the rule should exist, not even because it's like it's obviously it's an arbitrary line, but, like, can you imagine if Lamar had played 12 games this year and they were like, he's the best player, give him the MVP. Like, I kind of think it's nice. We've talked about this a lot. The incentives of playing of the regular season mattering,
right? And
the NBA MVP award matters a lot. But I think it's actually somewhat cool to incentivize players to care about certain parts of the regular season. And there are a clear 4 best players in the NBA. Obviously, not all of them can try and win the MVP, but I think it's cool that guys can care about winning it, whether it's the rule or not.
Oh, yeah. No, you're not going to get a disagreement out of me. It's cool if they care about it. I'm not going to belabor the point that I know that I'm thinking is that
too many games.
There's too many games, and these rules are a way to try to fix a problem without actually addressing the issue. So I'm with you. I'd love for there to be more like natural incentive and desire to play in these games. I just don't think the 65-game rule accomplishes that. I think it does probably, if anyone in this situation, Tyrese Halliburton, like that sucks for him because he had like, was it $41 million riding on it? And then the decisions, which I guess that's not the 65. Well, yeah, it is the 65-game rule because
you can't make an all-NBA team if you don't play 65 games.
And then your super max value goes up higher if you make those teams. So like, it sucks to have a seemingly arbitrary line like that determined, but it also sucks to have something somewhat arbitrary, or not arbitrary, but somewhat or completely out of your control, I guess, determined. So like the idea in general that your salary can be tied to all-star games or all NBA teams or MVP trophies, like that kind of stinks also when your value is clear what your value is. So like,
and that's very different. That's very different. The salary being tied to it, I think, is different than the concept of like from the fans' perspective.
I mean, it's not different because it's the same thing. It's like things that people want. We're not going to let them have it unless they reach a arbitrary line, and that to me feels unfair.
The intent of this rule was it's essentially a load management rule, which is not the case with Embiid, nor is it the case with Tyrese Halliburton. And the odds are with Embiid is that he's not going to come close to it now, and probably not with Halliburton, who's He's on, actually, maybe he will because he's on a severe minutes restriction coming off his hamstring injury. But, the point of that is that if a guy plays 50 games, he probably isn't the MVP anyway. Like, if we get into Bill Walton territory, if you're that much better than everyone else in the NBA and your team is that much better because of you. The second part I wanted to ask about this, do you think the narrative amongst fans mattered at all to Embiid and convinced him to play?
Well, I think it matters. I don't think that it would convince him to play.
Like, can you imagine someone in your locker room being like, fans are like calling our offense dog, and now we need to go out and try and score 40 points. Like, it feels like motivations are so internal in professional sports locker rooms.
Yeah, but we hear the noise. So, yeah, I do think that players do respond to the noise around them. Because the narratives, as much as we want to pretend like they don't matter and we block those, the narratives do matter. Mm-hmm. Those become the way that we talk about the players and the way that we see the players and where they were drafted, how media people talk about them, how their fans talk about them, how they behave in these big-time situations like that. That becomes what the story is around these players, and they care about that because that's essentially all you have at the end of it is like whatever that legacy is to the degree that it matters to you, that's all you have. So, yeah, I do think that they care. On a micro level, like this 65-game thing, I think to Embiid, it might matter more to him than most because of how his career has panned out and that he missed his whole first season and he's been in and out and he's had a bunch of kind of nagging injuries. I do think it matters some, but again, I don't necessarily think this injury was a result of it, any more so than the idea that the more games you play, the higher chance you are getting injured because you're just out there more often. So, like, I guess it contributed, but I feel like
it's a contact. This is not Durant's Achilles. This is a contact injury.
Right, that's my point. And I mean, even Durant's Achilles, I would say that if you run up and down the floor 10 times, whatever the chance is to blow your Achilles is a certain number. You do it 100 times, then of course it goes up.
Also, Durant, if we're being honest, had 3 years of everyone calling him a
right,
and
essentially,
and they knew he was leaving the offseason. People were like, he doesn't want to play for this Warriors team again, and he went out there when he shouldn't have, and so relitigating all of it. It just feels drastically different than the Embiid situation, where he's gotten. Like we've talked about this. We talked about this with Russillo when he was on, that people, despite the fact that Embiid hasn't made it as far in the playoffs, despite the fact that he's had these injuries and he's had things, like people still like Embiid. It's not the same. It's not the same amount of
Harden or it's not the same that we talk about Harden or Durant. But I'm making a simple point that, which I guess it doesn't really matter necessarily, but like, the chances of injury go up the more you play.
Yeah.
The more time you put yourself out there, you're at risk.
Definitely. Especially then, when you're 7'2", 300 pounds, and they had to literally teach you how to fall because it was safer than landing.
Yeah, I mean, this all goes back to, and this is a sports business conversation, which is why I think it's probably interesting for us to have this conversation, is like all this stuff is tied to CBA negotiations in a way that all the way, I mean, even the contracts, the Supermax and all that stuff is tied to that, which is like they're trying to find ways to solve problems. But the fact of the matter is, you can't solve a problem if you don't solve the problem. And the problem just moves.
Very wise. Can't solve the problem unless you solve the problem.
I think it makes sense. It makes sense to me. I think that maybe people listening understand. I appreciate you pointing out that it sounds stupid and like a fortune cookie. But the fact of the matter is, rather than addressing the issues that they've had with like salaries, rather than actually like being able to negotiate or frankly paying the players what they are worth, they institute a max deal. And then players like, well, I need higher than max. All right, we introduce Supermax. We institute all these other things. How do we determine that? By putting it on All-Star games and All-Pro. Like, it all is just a convoluted way for the owners to protect themselves against spending more money than they want to spend. And like, it all goes back to that.
And it's interesting because those are framed in ways of like protecting the integrity of the product because it made it easier or advantageous for players to take teams with the franchises that drafted them because they could offer the most money, and then it led to all the trades, which pissed off fans even more.
But has that happened? That's the thing.
No, it made it worse. It actually made it worse.
That's the point that I'm trying to make. Is like,
it's disgusting.
It's like they keep trying to address these issues without actually, like, they try to do these little fixes and tweaks, and like they do these. Don't.
Well, this is actually, I think, like, I've been a massive NBA fan. I've had periods where I've like really nerdily watching League Pass and digesting the stats from Cleaning the Glass way more than I should. But there are breaking points when the regular season doesn't seem to matter as much, and star players demand trades in the first year of Supermax contracts. It actually makes it worse for fans. So that's your point. I do have one last question.
The salary cap is what it comes down to.
Sure,
It's like,
yeah.
That's what it all boils down to, because then you could pay players what they were worth based on their value, and there would be no incentive for players to do this type of dumb. You could also tie the amount that you pay them to the number of games that they play. Like, you could do those things.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. And just like,
So this is the last thing to bring it back to Embiid and put a button on this.
I would write a piece if I still wrote.
Well, I was
It's a
going to
good
ask you,
piece.
if
It's
you were
blaming
still,
the salary cap for Joel Embiid's knee injury. I love it.
what would your reaction be if you were still running the NBA PA and this happened?
Well, I never ran it. I was chief operating officer, but my reaction is
See,
always,
if you're a C-suite
I know.
employee.
I didn't want to be disrespectful to Chris Paul or Michelle Roberts. It's a good question. I mean, I think, first of all, you consult with the player about what they're comfortable with you doing. But I think the most important thing that I try to always remind myself is, like, you're not, even though I said you consult with the player because it's their story, is you're not ever operating on behalf of an individual player. And when they're like issues with discipline, you have to remind yourself of that, because sometimes you think the player deserves some discipline for what they've done, but you have to understand that you're defending the rights of players as a whole and not just this individual player. This situation is not nearly as serious as anything like that. So I think I would definitely use this as an opportunity to try to remove something that I think is silly. And like, this would definitely be the Trojan horse I use to try to take down the idea of this 65 game minimum. And it's also like, by and large, while the things that unions and sports leagues disagree with, by and large, those are the things that we talk about. But most of the things we agree upon, and I think this falls in the category, is like, I actually don't think this 65 game rule is good in the long run for anybody. My belief, and like, different players, most players are different. But if you live in a world where you think you need to incentivize your guys to play,
They do.
I don't think you do.
They do.
I don't think you do.
If you're watching the NBA this season, you got to incentivize these guys to play and care about the regular season. Care about the regular season and play are two different things. And this is where we disconnect and it's all going to come back to my original point, is like, the games don't matter. So they're operating rationally because the NBA has created a situation where so many of the games don't matter. But I think that I think the players want to be at their best in the most important times. These guys aren't not playing because they don't like basketball or they don't want to play basketball. Like, I think these guys do want to play. I think they love it. They also recognize that the NBA has filled this season with a lot of fluff, and by and large, they'll deal with some ridicule right now. But what really matters is if they can win championships. Things.
Yeah, and that's where we are. And so, like, that's where we want to be. If that's where we want to be as a league, then let's change the rules to represent that.
Yeah,
that's all.
God, it's been the NBA regular season has genuinely been a degrading product since it seems like after that 2016 year, and it's a genuine bummer. As a fan of it, you want those games to be better. And some of the primetime games are still excellent. Of course, we know that when those things happen and guys lock in, it's still awesome. But
it's weird too, because I think that a lot of people say, and I would agree, that this is the most talented the NBA has ever been. Like, there are like real legitimate, and I think also because some of the great stars have been able to stay longer and be productive longer, there's like a real—
we'll get to that.
Yeah, there's a real glut of great talent all around the league, just about every team. Unfortunately, not the team that is in our local market. They are not filled with talent. I went to that game when they against the Heat, and I went with my friend DeQuell, and he made a good point towards the end of that game. It's like the middle of the fourth or something, and Jimmy Butler, he was like, damn, Jimmy had like a quiet 25, and it's like impressive. And we looked up, and Jordan Poole had 9, but it was a loud 9. It was just misses from all over the place, and it made me sad for the future of Washington basketball.
He'll get to hide in Alexandria.
See you guys.
So the next story I want to talk about, it's our passive aggressive petty king.
Oh, James.
King James.
There he is.
LeBron. We're recording this on Sunday night after a weekend of reckless speculation about LeBron James and his future that was started by LeBron James. Okay, not totally started by LeBron James. There was a reporter in Los Angeles who dropped the tweet that Rob Pelinka and the Lakers wanted to trade LeBron. Then you had Rich Paul essentially speaking as though he was running the Lakers, saying that LeBron will not be traded and that he does not want to be traded. But the way he phrased it, he will not be traded, was interesting because LeBron doesn't have a no trade clause. He doesn't actually get to support that. Then the Lakers went to Madison Square Garden, and LeBron said, "I've always thought about being a Knick at some point in his career." This was following the Lakers team that sort of galvanized and beat the Celtics and gave them their first home loss of the season without LeBron and Anthony Davis. And what's interesting, I want to build a case for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
I think that the Lakers should trade LeBron James. They're 26-25. LeBron James, I've been called LeBron James simp. I am biased on this. I love LeBron James. He has meant a lot to my basketball fandom and people of my age group. We've grown up watching this career unfold. At this point, he is becoming really annoying with this passive aggressive stuff. The tweets of the hourglass, making about himself with the Knicks stuff. This team is 26-25, despite the fact that LeBron has been incredibly healthy. He forced them to trade for Anthony Davis and gave up all of their resources, all of their picks, mortgaged their future to be for right now, for them to be 26-25. They built a roster that over the offseason, we were like, good moves. Lakers made good moves. They still aren't that good because LeBron is at a different point of his career. The numbers suggest he is still one of the best players in the NBA. But when you watch it, and I know if he's playing against Dylan Brooks in the playoffs, he can lock in and beat Dylan Brooks. He can go against a Warriors team that has no wing defenders, no interior presence beyond Kevon Looney, win those games. We saw it in the Denver series that he's not the most dominant player in the NBA anymore. So what are you doing if you have your entire cap tied to LeBron James? What are you doing if your future is to be a 500 basketball team with LeBron and he's going to leave anyway after he's drained you of all your resources, after you have no picks until 2029? Shouldn't you, in theory, if you know you're not going to win now, recoup some of that and let him go play for the Knicks? Let him be Jalen Brunson's Robin.
All right, so LeBron James is as big as any franchise in the NBA, including the Lakers. And because of that, I think you accurately pointed out that it has to be let LeBron. Like, it's not force LeBron out. I mean, I know you could.
Not force it, yeah.
I know you could. He doesn't have a no trade clause, so I know you could, but that's just not how things work with LeBron James. So if that's something that he wants, it'd probably be better for the Lakers than it would be for the Knicks, honestly.
Julius Randle, Evan Fournier, all the picks you got.
Yeah, I think it's more about the picks and building for a future around Austin Reeves, I guess. I don't know. Around Anthony Davis still. I don't know how long they expect Anthony Davis.
And you ship him out and get 8 more picks also.
What is the so if you talk about hierarchy, you said B, so you think do you think he's good enough to be LeBron we're speaking about, to be a number 2 on a championship team at this point?
Yes.
Okay, so you think that the Knicks, because the Knicks are on the verge right now, you think the Knicks become a championship contender with LeBron James? I think
contender, absolutely. Guarantee, absolutely not.
Yeah, I think that that's actually more interesting than what the Lakers should do. Is like, should the Knicks want this? Because, I mean, Lakers build for the future. I don't know. I tend to believe that basketball is unique in that when you get talent like LeBron James, even at the end of his career, like moving on from it, there's no, it's a lot like dealing with quarterbacks in football. Is like, there's no guarantee that you're going to get the next one. And
part of the reason the Lakers keep getting the next one is because of how they treat stars. Like, this has been going on since the Kobe era.
Which is also why you have to be on the same page with LeBron in order to make this happen. So I am uncomfortable because the NBA draft is not, it's not going to provide top level stars every year. Like, these players, so no matter how many picks you get, if you don't get lucky and get them in the right spot, and
you don't have your own picks,
you don't have your own picks, and you don't win the lottery, like, it's really hard to be able to get those players back, which I guess you can always rely on free agency if you're the Lakers and you have this reputation and you're in LA. So maybe that's the way going forward. You use those picks to trade to find other pieces to build around whoever the next star is. But I do think the Knicks conversation of them being competitive, I think the roster actually is suited for LeBron at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's the best? Do you think LeBron is better off in trying to make a run in the West with this group, or do you think he's better off trying to make a run in the East with that group, assuming that they don't lose anybody except for Julius Randle?
Yeah, I mean, things broke really well for the Lakers last year, and they went from being on the verge of not even making the play-in. Like, they were out of the play-in. They were 13th or 14th in the West for long portions of the season, to making the conference finals and playing the most competitive sweep we've ever seen against the Nuggets.
I remember that. That was embarrassing.
And no, I mean, he was awesome in the postseason.
He was great.
Yeah. And the team was really good. Jokic and Nuggets were just on another level. I think the West is significantly better this year. So in the East, let's look at it. You're going to have to go through Giannis and the Bucks.
Yeah, which is not as scary as I think it's been at its peak.
You're going to have to
They're transitioning to a new coach right now.
You're going to have to go through the Celtics.
A coach that loses a lot of big series. Anyway.
You're going to have to go through the Celtics, and that's the big one. That team is really good. And I think this is when you think of I love that you glossed over and accepted the fact that I called LeBron a number two option on a championship team beyond Jalen Brunson. I thought that was going to spice a reaction, but it's just true at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't want to fight. I mean, I guess, that would be interesting in the late game situations. Where would they want the ball to be?
Either of them.
Yeah, I guess. But someone's going to have it.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
I think that is still the better option. I don't see them getting through a really loaded Western Conference with this Lakers team. I think it gives a much better shot in the East, whether it's the Knicks, maybe the Heat get in there, get a little Heat culture back in LeBron. But the thing part of the reason is it would just be so delicious to see LeBron own Boston one more time, to go in there and rip their heart out one more time.
In a Knicks jersey, that'd be pretty fun. I do. See,
and this also, to our conversation, changes a lot because Joel Embiid might not be in the postseason. We don't know.
Yeah, it does. This is where it gets hard to be a front office decision maker, because it feels like an all-in splash move that does not that anything could guarantee you a championship, but for the last, I don't know how many years now, the Knicks have been like a well-run kind of organization that seems to be building in a slow, methodical, in the right way, attracted, which I guess Jalen Brunson was not like a top level free agent, but he's turned out to be one now. Mm-hmm. And they had the relationship there to help. But they seem like they're moving in a direction that, and they have the assets to make some moves. They're moving in a direction that seems like a steady incline. Getting LeBron means you need to win the title this year or next, right? Yeah. And what you're going to have to give up to get him means that you are mortgaging your future for a chance to win a title right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the smarter move for the Knicks. It's like he's 40 years old, right. Damn near 40 years old. Also worth noting, you're talking about relationships and how the Knicks have taken on Tibbs and Jalen Brunson's image and how they're this rugged team with OG Anunoby. We're going to talk relationships. Not the best relationship with LeBron and Leon Rose and Wes at this point.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
I don't know if he'd be the happiest in that work environment. And an unhappy LeBron, no one is really happy.
Sounds fun for us.
Yeah.
I mean, more passive-aggressive LeBron or angry LeBron banging on the Celtics sounds like a lot of fun.
It's also just so funny. The Knicks have been that friend who can't get a date forever. And finally it's got that significant other. We love that significant other. And then someone walks through the doors. Should we upgrade? Is now the time?
Very true. I'm looking forward, as much as I've enjoyed this football season, I'm looking forward to having the bandwidth to dive back into basketball and get smart on all this stuff and talk about it with you as the season comes and be smarter than you in basketball. I don't feel like I am right now. It'll just take me a couple weeks.
Yeah, that's probably true. Super Bowl.
Football. All right. Thanks, Charlie. It's been great. Thanks, Podville, for letting us use this wonderful studio. And, of course, thank you to all the great producers. We'll go with Cortez first because I love him so much because he's a coward. Brian, Serafina, Kevin, and Megan. And we're out.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.